we're looking at a really crucial shift in the reparations discussion. We're moving beyond just, waiting around for state policy and looking at the moral imperative of individual action.
Immediate action.
Exactly. And our sources focus on this incredible working blueprint, the partnership between Sarah Eisner, who's a descendant of enslavers, and Randy Quarterman,
who is a descendant of the enslaved, and together they created what's called the Reparations Project.
Okay, so let's unpack this because it wasn't just some abstract idea.
Not at all. Eisner was actually doing genealogical research on her great-great-great-grandfather, George Adam Keller, a pretty prominent plantation owner in Georgia.
And that's when she found it.
Yeah, the direct, really uncomfortable link to Zyke and Grace Quarterman, who were enslaved on his property.
But the thing that really kicks this all into gear, the thing that struck me in the source material, was the immediate pressure. Because even though Keller deeded the Quarterman family 10 acres way back in 1890, that land was still vulnerable. It fell under this thing called heirs property law.
And that vulnerability became a full-blown crisis in 2019 when the Georgia Department of Transportation tried to seize the land.
Eminent domain.
Exactly. And for anyone who isn't familiar, heirs property is basically land inherited without a clear modern title. It leaves it just extremely vulnerable to forced sales or seizure by outside groups.
So that threat is what really galvanized them into action.
It did. It spurred this whole foundation.
So, okay, let's talk about the big criticism. How do the sources handle the argument that this kind of bottom-up action lets the government off the hook for, actual federal reparations?
They're very, very clear on this. This model is explicitly not a substitute for federal action.
It's a parallel track.
It's defined as an immediate, necessary action, a sustained commitment, not just a one-time charity check while the legislative process stalls. And they built it around 3 pillars.
Okay, so pillar 1, invest. Economic and educational capital.
And it's highly targeted. They focus on what they call race-based and harm-based scholarships.
The idea being that education's a primary lever for wealth transfer. The big example is the Parsons Dwight Law Scholarships.
Right, a $30,000 scholarship. It's for African-American law students who have documented family ties to enslavement in Georgia. And it's sending them to top-tier schools like Yale, Columbia.
To learn how to use the legal system to protect their communities.
It's direct resource realignment.
Then pillar 2 is redress. Land preservation.
Which is absolutely central to the whole project, especially in the Gullah Geechee communities around Hilton Head and Savannah. They're putting money directly toward paying back taxes, redeeming properties,
and securing black land ownership. And their legal efforts are a huge part of that.
Oh, crucial. They're funding initiatives to fight eminent domain and to help families clear up those debilitating clouded titles from heirs property law. It's a major cause of black land loss in the South.
And that brings us to the third pillar. Amplify. This is about narrative truth and art.
I found this part fascinating.
It centers on the repossessions art exhibition, but what's really radical about it is that it requires white families to share what the sources call objects of harm.
So we're talking about plantation ledgers, slave manifests, old maps.
Exactly. And that's so vital because of the 1870 brick wall.
Right. For so long, tracing black family history past the 1870 census, the first one to list formerly enslaved people by name, was almost impossible.
So by releasing these private, raw, archival records for what they call reparative genealogy, these families are helping to tear down that wall.
It's giving people back their history.
So what does it all mean? This model reframes the entire action. It takes it completely out of the world of charity and puts it firmly into redistribution of wealth.
I mean, the sources really highlight how the process demands a voluntary surrender of not just resources, but records, which directly confronts that idea of white shame and aims for ancestral healing.
And it sets a standard, doesn't it? It says that the beneficiaries of historical exploitation should be rerouting resources directly to the descendants of the harmed. Which brings us to our final thought for you to explore. The source material notes that Eisner's ancestor donated land wealth generated by enslaved labor, to the Georgia Baptist Foundation. It was later found that this foundation primarily benefited white students.
The direct diversion of wealth.
So consider this.
Yeah.
How many institutions today, universities, churches, corporations, are built on specific historical diversions of wealth, just like that one? And what responsibility do today's beneficiaries have to actively reroute that funding back to the descendants of the people who were harmed?